This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
All right. Are you all set?
Almost. Let me take these last few bites.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I should finish this donut before we get started.
Hey, guys. Oh, are you guys already set up? That's awesome.
Yeah. Check your audacity while I finish my donut.
Donut? Oh, man. Shoot. I should have gotten something before I came down here. Do you guys have any more donuts?
I'm sorry, man. You said you grabbed dinner already, so we got one each on the way in. You said you weren't hungry.
I am hungry, though.
Sorry. We'll make sure to double check next time, though.
Time for some podcast mind tricks. Bob, you don't really want that donut.
I don't really want the donut.
What?
You will give your donut to me.
I will give my donut to Phil.
Good boy.
Wait.
My donut.
Oh, that was Bob's donut.
Yeah, it was, but I wanted the donut.
That's no reason to make him give it to you against his will.
That's right. I would have shared it with you if you would have asked.
Fine, whatever. Next time I won't use my awesome powers without your permission. Whatever.
Hey, good boy. And with that, welcome to the 421st episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight we discuss agency-depriving mechanics, the problems they can create, and how to use them safely in your game. Along the way, we'll take questions, suggestions, and examples from the chat room for life before jumping into the after show. Because this is going to be a hefty topic, we're not going to be doing our usual roundtable this week. But before we jump into all that, my name is Jerry.
My name is Phil.
And I am Old Man Logan. Good evening, all, and welcome to the show. And as always, let's do a temperature check real quick to make sure that we're all kosher before we enter the house. Welcome to the lobby area, the vestibule, whatever you want to call it. Phil,
Sure.
How you feeling?
Physically, feel fine. Mentally, I am a mix of anxious and excited. Right? If you are not in the States, maybe you don't know, but tomorrow we inaugurate our new president. Hence why I'm both anxious and excited. I'm very excited for the inauguration to occur and very anxious that nothing goes wrong. But we've basically turned Washington D.C. into a giant fortress. So I think we're okay. I'm feeling pretty good about it. But still nervous. Definitely just want to kind of see it go through smoothly. And then I'll take a big sigh of relief, right? I think if you follow me on Twitter, you kind of know where I lean politically. I'm looking forward to the end of the current the current occupant of the White House, and I'm super excited to not have to check my phone every morning to find out what the horse has done in the hospital.
Yeah,
if you know the reference. And to be honest, I'm just looking forward to what I'm hoping is going to be like 4 years of kind of adult politics, like, somebody running the country like an actual person. I'm not going to say anymore. Otherwise I'll just start swearing. Anyway, I'm anxious and excited. I feel fine. I'm hoping in a couple days that the anxiety part will level out and I'll just I can mellow out a bit. But it's been a little bit of a week.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be happy tomorrow evening. Cool. Jer, how about you?
Pretty good. Did a little bit of traveling last week, but it was all safe. But got a lot of podcast listening time in, which is nice. I haven't done that for a while. So it's been a bit of a blur other than that. Like I remember last week's game or last week's show. I remember there was a football game this weekend that was amazing, and other than that, like the rest of the past week has just been a weird blur, very fuzzy. So, some of that may have been due to all the cold medicine I was taking, but
however you get through the day, man.
Yeah,
however you get through the day.
But I'm feeling optimistic and confident, and I'm looking forward to what's coming up next. So
there we go.
Keep that shit up. How about you, Bob?
Physically, I'm feeling pretty good. No major ouch. There's a little bit of the arthritis annoying me, but it's mostly behaving. Allergies I've kind of got under control again. So physically not bad. Mentally a little anxious. Like Phil said, to get this thing over with, get the adults back into the house, and let some people who have a clue run the show. And emotionally, I'm in the downside of broken, working my way back up. Yesterday we had to take our dog Darwin to the vet and say goodbye.
Oh no!
That sucks.
And
I'm sorry, Bob.
I saw that.
That's all right.
That sucks.
I did not see that.
I made the statement once early, and then she kind of went radio silent. So it didn't probably filter around to everybody in normal channels, but so that yesterday was rough. I had a moment today where I broke down and I ugly cried watching an episode of The Last Airbender. So I got that out of my system for today, I think. I'm ready to do a show. And it'll get better day by day. So let's do the thing.
Yeah, so sorry, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. All right, one thing. This is one of our favorite segments of the show sometimes, because we get to gush about the thing that is delighting us. And as Jerry mentioned, there was football. I'm kind of in a weird headspace because of football playoffs. The Buffalo Bills are in the AFC Championship game, which is essentially, it's the penultimate game before the big game, the Super Bowl. Everybody, even people who don't know football, have heard of the Super Bowl. Okay?
Sure.
That's the game, right? And if we win this weekend, we go to that game. And we haven't been to that game since the 4 in a row that we lost.
Yeah.
So this team is not only reminding me and several people in the community about the way it used to be back in the heyday in the early 90s, but it's also different from then. It's like there's hope and light and excitement like we haven't seen in a long time. It's been 25 years. It's like, and part of us is like, don't hope too high, because you don't want to get your heart ripped out again. But also like, oh man, it's like, ugh. And
dude,
it was a really good, and it was a good game last week.
The game was
a good
lot
second
of fun.
half of a game.
Well, I mean, the first half was good. It just wasn't as exciting.
Drip.
Yeah.
But as soon as that interception in the end zone occurred,
it's
and then
it's a thing. It's a thing, and
then Bill's Mafia stepped up afterwards too. Which was nice.
Oh
Here's
man,
the thing.
Bill's Mafia, right?
Personally, I have a problem with that name. It annoys me. All right, but everybody seems to be on board with it, even the national media and everything, and like, whatever, that's fine. To me, when I hear the word mafia, I think bad things. I think organized crime, goons with guns. Like I don't get a good vibe from the word mafia, but they glommed onto it, and like everybody's riding it, and they're like, okay, fine, that's good, whatever, Bill's Mafia. But what they're doing, people started out with this view of Buffalo fans like, what a bunch of friggin' chicken wing eating morons. They're jumping through tables and breaking tables in the parking lot. And now
we do that.
We did do that. And there was the one time where they had a camera crew and 2 people were having sex in the parking lot. And people were like,
we do that.
Yes, they did that. But that's not everybody, every game, all the time, okay? Not everybody jumps through tables. Not everybody boinks in the parking lot. Yes, those were isolated incidents that got national media attention. But guess what else is getting national media attention? We have some of the biggest hearts in the history of football fandom, okay? We beat the Baltimore Ravens this past weekend, and their star quarterback, who was the MVP of the league last year, got knocked out of the game with a concussion and couldn't come back into the game. And after the game, the fans of Buffalo said, you know what? Cheers to that guy. He's awesome. Let's give money to his favorite charity. $350,000 plus later, we've been giving money to his charity. Okay. It's like, these are the kind of things we just gave the equivalent, with some help, over $2 million to the local children's hospital in the name of our quarterback, Josh Allen's past grandmother. Right. She passed away, and everybody's like, oh my God, that's so sad that he went out and played, and we gave money, and the children's hospital was so grateful for all the money and everything. They named a wing after her. Okay. Like, these are the kind of things that we do, you know? So they've had two things the children's food bank that they donated to. They said on Sunday that just the Bills fans' donations is their highest daily total they've ever had. That's awesome.
It came from Buffalo.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's very cool.
I mean, people know Buffalo for snow, but the city has another nickname.
Yeah.
Right. It's the city of good neighbors, right? Like, we are like that's who we are. Yeah. Right. And I mean, it's been awesome. They went to work on that donation like right after the concussion started.
Oh yeah, minutes after he got knocked out of the game
was over.
Whoa. Yeah. So yeah, that's who we are, and we deserve to have like a championship come to Buffalo. So there's little things that are like they giving us like hope that maybe it could be coming this year. And I'm just trying to keep it level because I don't want to get my heart torn out. But one of the poetic things. Oh, yeah. In such a bleak year. Dan Rather, famous former newscaster, said, if you want to know how 21 is going so far, I give you one thing. And he said, #Bills. And it's like, oh, my God. And Dan Rather is pointing out that we're doing good and it's kind of a light in the darkness. It's like... Yeah. But here's one of the poetic things about this year, and then I'm going to walk away and give it to the next one. The Super Bowl this year is being played in Tampa, Florida.
Yes.
Tampa, Florida is the site of the first Super Bowl the Bills ever played, where we got our hearts ripped out by the wide right kick by Scott Norwood. We lost the game because Norwood couldn't hit the field goal from 43 yards. Wasn't his fault. We should have got him closer. The Bills players. I'm not a Bills player. I wasn't. But that moment was heartbreaking for the entire Western New York region. And if we get a chance to go back to the Super Bowl, we're going back to the same place that happened. Think of the poetry of winning the game in that. Oh, I have to stop. I'm done. I'm going to get verklempt. Jerry.
Fair enough.
Jerry, how about one thing?
I'm still watching Lucifer. It's been I've been watching things like DS9 and all that, which are a little heavier. Lucifer's been a little lighter, mostly. Like I said, I realize I'm 5 years out on this from everybody else, but it's been a lot of fun. I like complicated characters. I like I don't want to say he's morally ambiguous because he genuinely has his heart in the right place. He's just extremely unskilled. So it's the super powerful fish out of water learning to be a human story. And it's a lot of fun, and the jokes are good, and the stories are fun, and it gives you something kind of fun to play at, and just playing around with the mythology involved and everything else is just interesting. So I'm enjoying the show a lot, and I watch an episode or two every night, and it gives me something to just kind of laugh at before I drift off to sleep.
Cool.
How about you, Phil?
Well. I watched, and I think the rest of you guys did too, but I watched WandaVision. Boy, it's a thing.
Yes, it is.
It's not like any other MCU
No.
product you've seen. It is. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Like, I really loved it. I will say that, like, I don't think you have to have any other. I don't think you need to have anything other than an understanding of the MCU to jump in. But I think if you have some background in classic television, so like 60s, like, you know, I mean, honestly, the first episode is basically Dick Van Dyke. The second episode is Bewitched.
Yeah.
And I've seen other clips where they've shown what look like other shows that are very recognizable.
Yeah.
I think that will help immensely. And at the very least, if you're a fan of, like, if you have any kind of nostalgic memories for those TV shows, you will definitely get a kick out of it. I will also say it is surreal and creepy at times. Yeah. There is a scene in the first episode that is like David Lynch style creepy.
Yeah.
I saw one person basically say, you know what? After 2 episodes, this is a horror show. And I'm like,
yes.
I don't know if I would classify it 100% as a horror television show, yep. But it's a lot more than you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I think it was Jason Cordova who said it. And I was inclined to agree to some extent. I think, personally, my gut feeling is this is the MCU's version of House of M, which I think would be awesome because I think House of M is way too heavy-handed, and this would be a cool way to kind of do. This would be a kind of cool route by which to bring Vision back, is through this, like, kind of through this pathway and story. So we don't know much. Obviously, I'm just going to be watching it. Like, I'm ride or die on this thing all the way through now. So I'm definitely in. It was good.
The acting is amazing. I'm interested in where they're going with some of the characters, some of whom I think are not who they appear. I won't say which ones.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever read the book I Am the Cheese, but there's a little bit of there's a little feel of that going on as well.
There are so many things about the show that the attention to detail that the creators put into it, the set designers, the costumers, like they went all out to evoke the feel of the different eras that they've hit so far. And when I finished watching the 2 episodes, my first instinct was to call it delightfully bizarre, because it's just it's a little weird. It's a lot.
It reminds, for those of you who are video gamers, if you've played Fallout 3, if you've ever been in the vault that takes you into the black and white creepy Leave It to Beaverland, that's what this is a lot like. It reminds me a lot of that. I don't remember the name of it's the Von Braun vault. But it's that kind of creepy and fun. At the
performances
time.
are great. Paul Bettany, his comedic timing is excellent. So yeah, it's like 9 episodes. 2 of them have dropped already, and they're going to work their way through a bunch of different TV sitcom eras. They've done the 50s and the 60s now, so they're going to work their way up through, and then it's going to get even weirder.
I'm having a good time. I like it a lot. Yeah. And as we discussed last week, I really like the idea that they've said that they're going to do, like, there is no set episode length. The story that they're telling is half an hour. It's half an hour. The story they're telling is going to take 90 minutes. You get a 90-minute episode. That, just have at it. And I love that about it.
So here's the thing I didn't know. Until last weekend. And I don't know how I didn't know this, but I didn't. And maybe all of you will be like, duh, Phil, of course we knew that. So Elizabeth Olsen is the youngest sister of the Olsen twins.
Yes,
the Olsen twins.
Yeah.
So imagine growing up that your 2 older sisters in the 90s are like this, like, media, like, fucking icons, right? Like, I mean, they had a small empire by the 90s, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, you had to live in that shadow the whole time. And then you turn around to be like one of the major characters of the largest movie franchise that has ever been created.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you are now like permanently fixed as like one of the most powerful characters. She's easily the first or second most powerful character in the Marvel universe.
Yep.
She's one of two characters who makes Thanos panic.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Wanda Maximoff, Elizabeth Olsen, I should say, is perfect for a meme, a particular meme. Mary Kate and Ashley are like, look, we're stars and da-da-da-da-da. And Elizabeth Olsen says, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I mean,
Yeah. And the thing is that from what I understand, she's also on very good terms with both her sisters. And
which is nice.
Yeah. And it's but just plus her reign. I mean, not only this, but she was in Old Boy, the American version of Old Boy. She was in the Godzilla movie. She's been in a bunch of other stuff already.
Yeah.
And this is just giving her a chance to kind of stretch her wings and show what she can do, because this is going to be serious and funny at the same time. And
yeah, there's a lot of different stuff that they get to do. Everybody who's in this gets to do a lot of different stuff.
Yeah,
I'm going to usher us forward.
Yep.
I'm going to usher us forward. We've languished in the one thing for a bit.
We loved it.
Okay.
Announcements.
Quick announcements. DS9 Watch Party Week 22. Like, don't jump in. Like, unless you're just coming to watch the finale with us,
you
got
just
like
want to hang
2
out.
weeks.
Yeah.
We are watching two. We're watching one. I don't know. They're two good episodes.
Yeah.
The first one is very special to me, which I talked about briefly in the notes I put out this week. But I think I will argue that the episode we're going to watch tonight, the first one, is the queerest episode in DS9, which puts it above the one where Dax meets her wife, and I forget the name of the episode now.
Yeah.
But I will argue this is queerer than that episode, and I did not realize it until I rewatched it earlier this year, and I was like, holy shit. I'm excited to see how other people perceive it. The one after it is just a pure fun romp. And then we begin the descent into the finale. There are 8 episodes that lead up to the finale. They are essentially one episode for 8 weeks. It is just one. It is a set of continuing storylines that just get juggled from now till the finale.
And the finale is 2 parts together into one. So really, that's
correct.
10 episodes.
Correct.
You have a 10 episode finale.
Yes, it's huge.
It's unheard of.
What you'll see in these 8 episodes is they start tying off minor characters, right? Minor characters their like stories get tied off in various parts of this, and then you get down to just the majors by the end. I will say, I'm not going to announce it now. I think I'm going to announce it next week. But the Voyager list is going to be compiled hopefully this weekend. And we can start talking about a Voyager watch party. So we'll have details for that next week. And then lastly, before we jump into the main segment, the bundle of holding has a Forbidden Lands bundle of holding. We'll have a link in the show notes. But you can get everything. I'm pretty sure it's the entire catalog at this point. It's the main game. It's the Freezy part. It's the
it's 5 or 6 books.
Yeah, it's I'm lacking all the words for it, but I believe it is the entire game line you can pick up in PDF.
Yeah.
And if you're playing online, the PDF is actually all you need for right now. If you are eventually going to play it at your table, you will probably want the box set so that you can get the map.
Yeah.
But boy, everything you need. And I think we talk about it enough on the show that I won't go into it too much, but it is easily one of my favorite kind of old school fantasy-esque kind of games. It's the mechanics are definitely not old school.
Yeah.
But it definitely has this kind of old school look and feel to it. And I mean, Bob and I are 38. We would have been 39 sessions, but the Bills are playing this weekend, so there'd be no gamey.
That's fine.
There'd be no gamey this weekend. So We're 39 sessions into our campaign, so if that gives you any hint about the game and its staying power, it's totally worth it.
Yeah,
it
good
is
times.
it is totally worth the bundle of holding cost.
Yep.
Cool.
All right.
All right, we've kind of got a bit of a hybrid thing going on here this week.
Yes.
To a certain degree. So, I'm going to do this.
Access granted.
I'm going to open up the garage and then give Phil his workshop.
Oh, Jesus. Good. Workshop, agency depriving mechanics. What are those? It's things like mind control. We're going to take away your free will. We're going to make your character do things that are going to make you super pissed off and upset. No, we're not doing any of that. We're going to learn how to do it properly in the workshop.
Don't suck. All right.
I do have to admit, over the years, that the ability to just make that up on the fly, even sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do as you're pushing the button, and it just all spills out.
GMing, baby.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk about agency depriving mechanics this week. It started about 2 weeks ago. There was a thread going on Twitter and Facebook about a 5e player was frustrated. Another player had a magical sword that was loaded up with suggestion spells, and the owner of the item was abusing it. And even when the party tried to intervene, he would just use suggestions to make them stop. And the thread is a perfect storm of bad playing, bad GMing, and the pitfalls of mechanics that deprive agency from other players. We could have tweeted a response, but hey, we've got a show. So tonight we're going to discuss agency depriving mechanics, their pitfalls, and talk about ways they can be less dangerous.
Yeah, this episode is going to be a little bit of a garage episode, as Bob hinted to at the opening, because we need to kind of look at the mechanics of this, as well as a workshop, because we need to talk about how to GM this stuff.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds like we're going to need some definitions set up so that we have a framework for the discussion. So,
behold, you are in the presence of Definition Panda.
All right. So, what terms do we need to establish?
Yeah, we're going to have to unpack some stuff in order to get into this. So bear with us as we step through this. We'll try to step through it calmly and in an orderly fashion. And then we'll get into kind of more of the meat of this episode. But let's start off with the word agency, right? The capacity, condition, or state of acting or exerting power. Now, specifically in RPGs, agency refers to exerting power or control of your character, right? So we talk about character agency.
So when I play Tirgar in our Forbidden Lands game, I get to decide how Tirgar acts and what actions he takes.
Yeah, right. I don't make those decisions for you.
Nope.
Okay. The next one, and this one is, I think, really going to be the core of what we're going to talk about tonight, is consent, right? Compliance in or approval of what is done or proposed by another. And we really can't do consent justice until we unpack the word consent a lot more in terms of RPGs. So bear with me. We're going to get deep into this concept for a little bit. Consent consists of two components.
First, you're going to have somebody, the requester. This is the person or group that wants someone to do something. And then there's the grantor, who's the person or group being asked to do something that will either grant consent or not grant consent.
Yep.
Pretty straightforward.
Exactly. Right. So let's build on that. Two more items. Informed consent. Chair.
Mm-hmm. Informed consent means that the grantor has full knowledge and understanding of what is being asked and is not being lied to or deceived through omission.
And then enthusiastic consent?
Enthusiastic consent is the grantor is excited to give consent and does not feel direct or indirect pressure to provide this consent.
Yep. So our most ideal situation, right? Really the only true consent, right? Mm-hmm. The only 100% pure consent occurs when a requester provides full knowledge of what they want, mm-hmm. and the grantor understands what's being asked and then is excited to give consent to it.
Yep.
Okay. When we miss the mark in any of those areas, we have really not achieved full consent, right? We've failed to get actual true consent. And failure to get consent is something that is harmful. And how harmful it is going to depend on what's being asked or done, and the consequences that kind of come from whatever that is. And there are a number of ways we can fail at this, right? So we can fail to provide informed consent.
So this is what happens when we ask something of someone, but we don't give them all the information. We're basically asking someone to give consent without them knowing what's actually going to happen. And thus, they're going to be unaware of the full consequences of their actions.
Right. And this one's usually easy to spot because the words trust me.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you see this all the time where somebody's like, hey, let me do this thing. And then you're like, why? And the person's like, but trust me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is not informed consent.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is we can fail to obtain enthusiastic consent.
And this is a little harder to understand sometimes, but it basically means that the person says yes, but it's given under some pressure. They can feel direct pressure from someone to say yes, or they can feel pressure from power dynamics of the situation. For example, a new player in a group who just wants to go along with the group and says yes to something that they don't understand or don't necessarily want, just because they want to be accepted by the group itself.
Yeah, and a lack of enthusiastic consent is sometimes harder to pick up on. You really got to be paying attention, but it often comes out as kind of a weak yes or a sure, I guess so, right? Not a real firm like yes, like I'm totally down with this, like yes, like it's more like a all right, I guess so, Jer. Like that's it doesn't feel strong, right? It doesn't feel enthusiastic. All right, lastly, the other problem we can have is we can just not ask for consent. And this could be intentional, right? Which is pretty shifty, or shitty, and shifty. And it could be unintentional.
Yeah, intentionally, it means it's not requested, so there's no chance to say yes or no. But unintentionally is the requester thinks that the grantor has previously given consent, or doesn't realize that this is something that might require consent. They just think it's okay to do.
Yeah, and that's like, one of those. So the intentional one is really shitty, right? The intentional one is like, I don't have to, I can do it because if I ask you, you'll say no. So I'm just going to do it anyway, right? So I don't ask for consent. The unintentional one can really be, in all honesty, it could just be a misunderstanding between two people where I thought we covered this in session 0. Apparently we didn't. And then I thought it was okay to go forward and I didn't. You've still violated consent, but your intent may not have been malicious, where the intentional one, your intent is almost always malicious. Like almost like I don't know of a way where you intentionally don't ask for consent that doesn't come out with you not the bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Lastly, we need to understand a few more things about consent. Being informed can evolve as a situation unfolds.
So being informed before something starts is different than having experienced it partway through and having a more complete understanding. And as you're going through something, you realize this isn't what you thought you were going to get into.
Exactly. So that leads to our next one, which is consent can be revoked at any time.
The grantor can always take away consent by simply saying no, or by saying this isn't what I want, or I don't want to do that.
Exactly. Right. So this, just like we said in the previous point, you say yes, you grant consent at the beginning because you know as much as you know, and maybe the other person knows as much as they know, and then you get partway through it, and now you know more, and you're like, you know what? Not cool. I'm revoking consent. The last one is consent can be reaffirmed.
And this is where the requester can simply ask the grantor to reaffirm consent at any time to make sure consent is still present. You can say to somebody, listen, I know we covered this at the beginning, but are you still comfortable with where we're going? Or, I know you said it's okay if we do this. Are you still comfortable where we are now? And just get that consent. And that never hurts the game. It always makes things flow smoother. It always makes for better games.
I have never seen it. I've never seen it screw up anything.
Nope.
Like reaffirming consent has never screwed up anything.
Nope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nope.
Okay. So now ultimately all consent in an RPG is given among players, GM included, right? Because GM is technically a player as well. Because characters are not real. and they're only extensions of the players who are playing them. NPCs, extensions of the GM. Player characters, extensions of the players, of course. So where we do see differences is who is requesting consent, who is giving consent. And in RPGs, there are a few different ways to do this, right? There's character-to-character consent, right? The character consents to do something.
For example, when he's asked by Galavan, Tirgar agrees to detain the thief that was caught sneaking around. The characters could be PC or NPC in either role. They could be the requester or the grantor. But it's going to be between two different characters.
Sure. There's player-to-player consent, right? Where one player asks another to do something.
Bob asked me if it's okay to have my character's sister be his character's secret girlfriend.
Yep. And then there's GM player consent, where the GM asks the player or vice versa for something.
And, excuse me. And as a GM, I'm going to ask their players if they're okay with a betrayal by a major NPC in the game. Just to make sure that they're understanding that could something that could happen, or make sure they're comfortable with the idea of betrayal in the game.
Absolutely. All right. So lastly, there's no single place in an RPG for requesting consent, right? Requesting, affirming, and revoking consent can be done anytime during the course of a game.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about some common places where it comes up, but it's never limited to those places. All right. So that's kind of a big definition section. It may be the longest one that we've done. But I thought it was really important for us to kind of step through that and kind of really take apart consent, because a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight has to do with consent.
Cool. So now, Jerry, with all of that framework set, return us to agency-depriving mechanics and tell us how these work.
All right. Agency-depriving mechanics are game mechanics that remove the agency of a character or the agency of an NPC when the person only controls it and transfer that agency to somebody else. These often come in the form of some sort of power or ability because of how powerful they are. So first we're going to talk mechanically about how these work, and then look at some examples.
Yep. So we're going to have to start when a character has a character who has this ability, whatever form it takes, and we'll talk about some examples in a minute, when they trigger its use.
This ability will have some sort of definition of the number of targets, the range of use, and the duration. And it's going to have some constraints on what the person can do with that agency, hopefully.
We'll see. Maybe not always, right?
Yes.
There's often some sort of mechanism for the target to resist the request, right? So if that resistance check or whatever is successful, then agency is not transferred, right? The player can retains control of their character. If unsuccessful, the agency is then transferred to the wielder of the power.
And the wielder then takes control of the targets and has them do whatever they want within the confines of that ability.
Right. Many of these mechanics have sometimes have a role to allow the owner to revert control through a subsequent resistance roll. Some of them don't, right? So some of them will simply say this person is controlled for X amount of time, whereas other ones will say each turn the player can make, say like a will check to attempt to break this.
This control is going to continue until the specified duration wears off or until a set of events specified by the ability allow it to stop.
Exactly.
All right, so now let's look at some examples in both media and in RPGs.
Yeah, I might have taken the media ones out as I was cleaning this up because we wound up with so many examples.
We could toss in a media one at the end. I know. I know a prime one. It'll be easier to do. So
I got a couple. I had a couple.
Maybe we'll
as well.
Pull one of the RPG ones out and replace it with a media one, so we don't go long.
Either way,
we can. I'll do the first one, which is the D&D 5e suggestion. Right. This is the one that kind of triggered this from that original post. Right. This is a second level spell. Range of 30 feet, lasts up to 8 hours. And basically, in a nutshell, and I assume this has, I think it'll probably just tell us in here that there's a will save. Yep, there is a will save, right? You suggest a course of activity limited to a sentence or two and magically influence a creature that you can see within range that can hear and understand you. Creatures that can't be charmed or immune to this effect. You need to word the suggestion in a way that the course of action sounds reasonable. Asking a creature to stab itself, throw itself on a spear, immolate itself, or do other obvious bodily harm ends the spell, right? So this is part of that boundary, right, of things you can and can't do. The target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it pursues the course of action you describe to the best of its ability. And the suggested course of action can continue for the entire duration. So remember, this thing lasts up to 8 hours. So if you tell someone to run away, they run away for 8 hours. If suggested activity can be completed in a shorter time, the spell ends when the subject finishes what they were asked to do. Okay. And then there's some additional stuff. Lastly, the last part of this is if you or any of your companions damage the target, the spell ends. So if you send them running down the hall away from you and then someone plunks an arrow into them, then the spell ends. Okay. So what we see here is we've got the resistance roll. That's the willpower. We've got some boundaries in the text about what you can and can't do. And, part of this is, as we'll talk in a bit, there are boundaries, but creative players will find ways to kind of skirt these boundaries. Okay. Jared, tell me about Savage Worlds. What do we got going on in Savage Worlds?
In Savage Worlds, there's a power called Puppet. That can be a spell or a psionic ability or hero power or villain power. And basically it is basically blatant mind control and use it to basically trick others into doing their will. And the way that this works is that it's an opposed roll. The requester will use their arcane spell or arcane skill, and it's opposed by the target spirit. If the puppeteer succeeds, the victim automatically obeys commands that don't directly harm themselves or those they care about. If they get a raise, which is the equivalent of a critical success, 4 over what you need to roll, the target is completely controlled, but still gets an automatic spirit check as a free action to avoid directly harming themselves or those they care about. If they succeed on that free check, they don't do the action, and on a raise, they actually break the power's hold entirely. And it lasts for 5 turns. So it's not a very long ability, unless you add other things to it. But it basically, within the limits of you can't make them harm themselves or somebody they care about. You can make them do just about anything else. It's not as powerful as things like Suggestion or Charm Person. And I've noticed that since the PDF first came out, like the rule book toned it down quite a bit and obviously corrected for some things that could have been abused. So it looks like they play tested a little bit and backed it up a little bit, but it still has some problems.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
My next one is both an RPG and a media reference, which is the Jedi Mind Trick. And for this one, I'll be quoting the Star Wars Saga edition, just cause. And this basically requires, it takes, a standard action to perform. 1 target of intelligence 3 or higher, right? You have to have some ability to perceive the command you're being given. The user makes a force check. If you exceed the target's will defense, so that's the resistance, right? The will defense. Then you can choose one of the following effects, right? You can create fleeting hallucinations, right? That's like Obi-Wan when he makes the little noises so he can sneak around in the Death Star. You can perform a feint, so the next attack you make against the target ignores their dexterity bonus, right? That doesn't seem too terrible. And then the last one, which is, the more wide open one is, you can make an otherwise unpalatable suggestion seem completely reasonable to the target. You must be able to communicate with the target, and the suggestion can't obviously threaten the target's life. The target won't realize later that what they did is unacceptable. And then the last one, which is a dark side power, is you can fill the target with fear. But that middle one right there, the otherwise unpalatable suggestion is the ever classic, these are not the droids you're looking for, or the, what is it? You will unshackle me. What is it Rey says to get out of the chair when she's talking to Daniel Craig?
Like a state for the record, as somebody who's played Marvel Star Wars Saga, the fear ability is not a dark side ability.
Oh no, I thought you'd. I think it tells you though you get a dark side point if you use this though.
No, it's what Obi-Wan used on the Sand People when he comes to rescue Luke.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The howling noise he does and all that. That's what they based it on originally.
Oh, anyway, I didn't cut the last piece of the PDF off on that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. That's all right.
But yeah, so this is the this is the classic Jedi mind trick. Star Wars, I think, does this pretty subtly. Like, no one ever puts a blaster to their head and blows their brains out. It's usually the simple suggestion so you can get past, get out of, released from some sort of restraint, something like that. Give me a classic. Give me a classic. This is a classic one.
This is a classic, and this is probably one of the most abusive ones, which was the old basic and expert D&D charm person spell. It's a first level magical spell. You can get it right off the bat.
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
It only affects humans, demi-humans, and certain other creatures. The victim is allowed a saving throw versus spells, but in old school D&D, that was a pretty hard roll to make. If the throw is successful, the spell has no effect. But if it fails, the victim will believe the spellcaster is his best friend and will try to defend the spellcaster against any threat, whether real or imagined. As a general rule, the spell only affects creatures which look similar to humans in various ways. Humans, demi-humans, semi-giant class creatures, etc. It doesn't affect animals and the like. If the spellcaster speaks a language that the charmed victim understands, they can give orders to the victim. These should sound like suggestions, as if just between friends. And the charmed victim will usually obey, but the victim may resist orders that are contrary to their nature, and he doesn't need to roll anything to resist those. They will refuse an order to kill themselves, and the charm may last 4 months. The victim may make another saving throw every so often, depending on its intelligence score, either every day, every week, or every month. So if you have a character who has a low intelligence, they can be charmed for a very long time. And if you're given conflicting orders and impressions by his old adventuring friends as his new best friend, he should react as anybody when in real life with confusion. He's not going to assume that one party or the other is lying, just that they're going to be confused. And lastly, it's automatically broken if the spellcaster attacks the victim, whether by spell or weapon, and the victim will fight normally. This was a very, very powerful ability and got seriously abused by a lot of players back in the day.
Yes, it's the kind of thing where your DM is going to be required to make up a whole lot of house rules around this thing. The only thing that's in here that saves the person who gets hit with it is the fact you will not kill yourself. Which I'm sure got added after some play testing.
Yeah. Because I just remember as a immature 8 and 9 year old, we abused the hell out of that spell.
Oh
constantly.
My goodness! I cleaned out shops with the charm person. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna give a couple. We got 2 more left to do. One for me, one for Jerry. That I do not think are exceptionally well written, or I should say, they're dangerous. Dungeon World's Charm Person is a first level enchantment, ongoing, which means it just goes on and on and on. There isn't a mechanism in this one because you actually have to make the spell casting roll. Like as a wizard, you have to cast the spell, so you have to get like a 7 to 9 or 10 plus or whatever. The person, not beast or monster, you touch while casting the spell counts you as a friend until they take damage or you prove otherwise. There's a lot you could do with that.
That's pretty damn vague.
It's pretty damn vague. It's not as scary as the next one, though, which is from a game that we were just talking about earlier.
All right. In Forbidden Lands, you have the ability called Puppeteer. The range just means near. It only lasts for 1 round, but you take complete control of your victim's actions. The victim must make an insight roll with a negative modification equal to the power level. If it fails, the victim becomes a puppet without control of their own body. This only lasts until the victim's next ordinary turn in the initiative order and covers 1 fast and 1 slow action. The victim cannot perform reactive actions or bonus actions from talents before the puppeteer's actions are performed, and this spell has no effect on monsters. So for 1 turn, you get to do anything.
Now, let me explain why this spell is so dangerous, and Bob will understand, having played. When it says you take a negative modification to your insight based on power level, the power level, so the way spells work in Forbidden Lands is that spells always work.
Yes.
When they're cast. You have to spend a number of willpower equal to the level of the spell. You then roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to that level, and any 6s increase the power level of the spell. This is a tier 3 spell, which means you spend 3 points, so minimum a character is going to make an insight check with 3 less dice before they make this roll. I'm pretty sure Tiergar can't even roll.
Insight? Yeah.
Right.
Not so
And
much.
notice, and this game is, European, right? This game's from Free League, right? So it came from Sweden first. Notice that there is no boundaries over this spell whatsoever.
Yeah.
It does not say that the person won't harm themselves. Like, maybe you'll just, one slow action is stab yourself in the face. So, yeah. So I guess my point for putting this in the example is, not every game hardens the spell, and you're going to run into this in various games, in various levels of how safe this spell is or isn't. I could pretty much with Puppeteer wipe at least a couple players out in my game before somebody killed this caster.
Yeah,
It's a bad spell.
that's a no bueno.
As a not as a hint, but as a promise, the spell will never come up in our Forbidden Lands game.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we've unpacked the first part of this topic for tonight. We've talked about consent. We've talked about agency depriving mechanics, like how they work, and we've taken a tour through a bunch of different games, old and new, that have these mechanics in them. We're now going to take a break, check in with the chat room. But first, Bob, tell me about another show on the Misdirected Marks Network.
I would love to tell you about a lovely little show called the Gnome Cast. Several gnomes from Gnome Stew get together to talk about gaming topics and themselves in an effort to entertain you and to avoid being thrown in the stew. So far, everybody's been successful, but you never know.
Someday, somebody's not going to make it.
Someday. All right, our chat room has been quite conversant about examples of really bad agency denying instances in some of their games. It was there have been some really good examples of what not to do.
It's a system. I'm not even sure why games put this in. Like, I really don't know why games include these anymore. Like
It, I kind of get some of the, but man, it's just, there's so much, it's so problematic.
yes, exactly. Right. Like it creates more problems than it solves.
Yes. And there's so many different aspects of these things that with all of the things that have come to light in the world over the last 20 years plus, like gaslighting itself is such a horrendous thing. And there's so much gaslighting ability in some of these things, and if you do not take a look at the safety aspect of some of this stuff before you throw it in a game and run with it, you're really you're asking for a problem now. It's just so icky. Icky.
I can't agree with you more, right? Like, and the fact that we all have one of these stories. We all have, like, I know very few players who have not brushed up against this mechanic where it hasn't completely sucked.
Yeah.
There was one I didn't mention that I thought was very clever was in DCC, in the Many Eyes module. The eyes, I forget what the name of that module.
Yes.
That was a fun. What's it? The one who watches.
The one who watches. That had a clever mechanic for how to handle it.
It had a clever mechanic, which was, in a nutshell, and this isn't the actual charm person, because there's a charm person spell, I think, in the DCC rulebook, but this thing was like an elder god, and it took, like, it was a saving throw. It was a will saving throw. Otherwise, it took control of you. But it either took control of the player got to decide. It either takes control of your movement or your action.
Yes.
But never both.
Right.
So it became this like really fun game because a couple of you became controlled by it.
Mm-hmm.
And it became this really fun game of like, I'm going to stab Bob's character with Jim, but Jim runs across the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
so like I just swing at the air because
I'm a stabby kind of character, so I'm not going to give him the opportunity to use my arm to stab one of my compatriots. I'm going to move to get out of the way.
Exactly.
So yeah. So that was, I thought that was a clever implementation of that.
It was really fun, actually. It made what normally is a very sketchy ability a lot more fun. Like there were a couple of cases where there were other things in the room you had to fight. So it was like, I'm taking control of my action and I'm stabbing that, floating eyeball. And it's like, okay, but then it moves you closer to its mouth.
Yeah.
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 And that made for fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a fun little chess game each turn.
Yeah. Jared pointed out in the chat room that the Quest Puppet Power, the game that we just finished up, Quest, has a puppet power, and it expressly says, ask the player if this is okay. If not, the boss can't use it.
Yes. Yes.
So literally saying, if the player's like, no, then guess what? The boss doesn't have that power anymore.
Yeah, guess what? That's consent.
Yep.
Like, I raise my half-drunk coffee to Quest.
Yeah. Well done.
Well played.
Yep.
All right. Well, we have a bunch of stuff still to unpack, so I'm going to roll us right back in.
Okay.
So, before we hit the break, we got our definitions down. We discussed how these mechanisms work, and we gave a bunch of examples. Mm-hmm. So now let's turn our attention to what kinds of issues these mechanics can cause in our games.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So these mechanics can cause a number of issues and problems. We're going to deal with two minor ones first, right? These are like two things that happen, and then we're going to get to the big one. So the first one is that players can have nothing to do, right? I think Senda has a story about this, right? Where depending on your game and the agency revoking power, a player could be sitting out for a few turns or a few minutes or an hour or whatever without any agency. And that, boy, that sucks, right? That's not fun if you're just kind of sidelined and can't do anything. Now some abilities are a little better at this, right? Like they make you best friends with the caster. So, if a player is willing to take up the change in role, right, then they can still role play the character. They just role play him as now being best friends by the person who cast it.
Yep.
But, like if it's there are other ones where it's just like, well, you've been hit with this mind control thing. You can't act.
Yeah.
And, I rolled 12 turns in a 14th level Pathfinder game. Right. That's like 4 hours from now. We'll see you later. Yeah, that sucks, right? That's no fun.
This is why I've never been a fan of spells like Hold Person or Turn to Stone or anything else, where we've seen games, Pathfinder's one of them, where the villain, at the big climax of the second book, the villain turned one of the players to stone for 14 turns.
All right. The only way that's acceptable is that if like 3 rooms before it, you found the scroll.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a scroll or a way to dispel it, that is awful.
Oh, it was the spellcaster she did it to.
Oh, well, there we go.
The sad thing was the fight lasted more than 14 turns. So they came back a couple hours later into the game. But yeah, it's never depriving the characters of agency with one roll is never a fun thing.
That's just shitty.
Yeah.
Tell me about another smaller problem.
A smaller problem is that the sense of circumventing plots or challenges. Use of suggested or other mind control powers can be an easy fix to solving or circumventing challenges to a plot. If you just mind control Baron Vought Badass, then there's no fight. Just command to step down and surrender. If the heroes in a resource poor post-apocalyptic, Misdirected Mark, word scramble, post-apocalyptic game, and they use their static power to just have everyone give them such supplies, there's no real challenge to that part. When these things take the struggle or conflicts out of a game, and can end up resulting in some very unsatisfying sessions. Or worse, this makes the GM go through a lot of story hoops in order to prevent the heroes from using their powers. For example, Magneto has a helmet to prevent Professor X from using his powers on him. Juggernaut has a helmet and a skull cap, just in case, to prevent people from mentally attacking. But they have one weakness, and their GM allowed them to nerf it.
Right. The Juggernaut has two, right? So it's like, oh, we got his helmet off. He's still got the skull cap. He's still running through all of you.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and like that to me is like bad hoop jumping, right? Like the Juggernaut has a helmet, and then you spend like half the fight to take it off, only to find out he has a skull cap.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not ready for me.
No, it's not fun. It's like when players, I mean, as a side point, right? It's like when players get like you remember when like Scry and Fry became a big thing in 3E?
Oh, geez, Scry and Fry.
Right, like you just scry and you'd scry the layer, you'd figure out where it is, teleport in, like drop a fireball, or just drop next to the bad guy and crush him and then get out. Right, so then all of a sudden, like every high level spellcaster has something that prevents scrying, that prevents this, prevents teleporting, and it's like what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like if we have to put this many things in, like are we still even having fun? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, those are the two minor problems with this power, right? So plot abuse and being sat out of the game. But really what we're here for is this last one. And that is, what action does the controller have the character perform? Right? This is the biggest reason there are problems with agency denying mechanics.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where all our talk from before about consent is going to come into play. Once someone's character is now controlled by someone else, we're now in an area where consent gets really dicey.
Yep.
And it comes down to if the character's player consents to what the person controlling the character now does with the character. Did I say that clear enough? Okay. I just want to make sure, because the word character gets used a bunch of times. I'll say it one more time to be clear.
Does the grantor agree with everything the requester is making them do?
Correct.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So, what we wind up here with is like, we need to figure out like what level of consent, what level of action is a player going to be comfortable having someone else have their character do.
Yeah.
Right. And I've written a couple questions here. Jerry's going to run through them. That's kind of like a sliding scale. They get like, they get progressively worse, with the two last ones being equally bad.
Yeah.
You want to run through them?
Sure.
Okay.
The first one, for example, at the low end, are you okay if your character drops their sword and stands outside the combat? Pretty easy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The second one, are you okay if your character is ordered to hold the door shut while Baron Von Badass escapes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Are you okay if your character is ordered to attack another character in the party? That can be problematic. Unfortunately, there are also players who would jump at that chance.
Uh-huh.
And then, are you okay if your character is ordered to sleep with Baron Von Badass? That becomes all sorts of consent problems. And lastly, are you okay if your character puts their blaster to their head and pulls the trigger?
Right.
So,
no, thank you, evil.
Yeah. So the point of this continuum, right, is that somewhere among those types of questions is your comfort level with where you are comfortable with this ability. Yep. Right? So now, depending on how the power is worded, some of these questions aren't applicable. Like all of the charm person ones say that you can't harm yourself, right? But none of them say you can't make someone sleep with you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Which is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you are a GM who really is really thinking mind open, that could also be harmful.
Yeah.
Right.
And as soon as you get people arguing, well, they're supposed to be my best friend. Some of them say best friend right in the description.
Right.
And that becomes a problem. It's got to be something that has to be.
I mean, who hasn't fooled around with their best friend before? Okay. Okay. Consensually, of course.
Yes, of course.
But now, like, you start to see where You see where these problems now creep in is because all of us have a different comfort level. And I'll be honest, I have a certain comfort level that is probably true in all games. And then in some games, it's a little different. Like in anything but DCC, I'm okay with the first two, and I'm not okay with attacking another character. But in DCC, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'd probably be okay with it. Like DCC has a very different connotation to me, right? Like, so I'm like, yeah, probably be. I'm probably okay
vibe.
If I have to attack another character.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to want to.
No.
So, like, given that choice, like in the one who watches below, I'll just keep moving myself out of combat. Right. But okay. Or I know my stats are low enough that if I attacked Bob's character in DCC, I'm probably not going to hit him.
Right.
Or if I do, it's probably not going to kill him.
I think that's where it comes out. Is it going to be fun for the two players involved?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the GM says, you know, well, I'm going to now Baron Bob Badass was going to try to order you to attack Bob, and Bob's like, yeah, bring it on, let's do this. Then maybe it'll be fun to play out. If that's going to be fun to play out, especially if it works well with character arcs that already exist.
Yeah.
But it's got to be consent between both players, not just the player being controlled, but also Bob.
Yeah, exactly.
Be okay with you attacking you.
Yeah. And you know, I'll say that different games, different themes, different feels are going to give you a different answer to this question. If I was playing Masks and I was mind controlled and asked, like, you know, I want you to blast the other two players in the scene, I'm definitely going to say yes, because the drama that this is going to create, like, is going to be epic, right? Okay, so basically what we're saying is, right, somewhere in this continuum of questions is your comfort level. And depending on how the power is worded, right, there may be some limits around this.
Right. Yeah. All right. So the next thing's going to happen is if this loss of agency occurs in the middle of combat, or if the loss of use of the character could be detrimental to the rest of the party, or things are tense, this is where things are going to be emotionally charged. If all of a sudden you being out harms not just you, but other people.
Sure.
And second, if you have any triggers around self-harm, non-consensual sex, just loss of control in general, being pushed around, bullied, whatever, this loss of agency could be harmful to the player as a person.
Absolutely.
And so you always want to have those aware, and that's one of the many, many reasons why consent is important.
Right. So what we get down to, right, is when this power is used, so part of what we need to figure out when we're thinking about consent about this power is, and there's a very fine line with this, and I'm no expert on this, but I will tell you because I have been the recipient of this power and I have wrestled with this piece, which is, it could be that I'm okay, I'm safe, I consent to this, even though this sucks. Right? So I'm not in any danger. I'm not unsafe. I just don't like this mechanic, right? This mechanic sucks. Or I'm not okay with this and I'm not consenting to it. Right? There's a line in there where it switches from one to the other. And that's important because if you play it off as, this just sucks, that's why I'm annoyed with it, and you're not paying attention to the fact that you're actually being harmed by it, like, this can produce a really bad experience, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you just acknowledge, like, oh, I just got hit with confusion, this fucking thing sucks. Right? Like, no, it's fine. I stand there like an idiot, like with my sword, you know, on top of my head, whatever. Like, I'm annoyed. It's fine. I'm still consenting to it. That's different.
Yeah.
And this is where informed and enthusiastic consent come in, right? So unless you've had a previous discussion about these types of powers, and we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, right? Unless you've had a previous discussion about these types of powers in your game, you might not be informed at this moment, or you may not be informed to your level of comfort. Like, if we're playing D&D and we've never talked about the suggestion spell before, and I just hit you with suggestion, like, you're not informed. You know, like, we're going to talk about what to do about that in a second. But you're not informed at that moment. So how can you consent? And again, we'll talk about some tactics for dealing with that. if you're feeling any pressure from anyone else at the table to just quote play along or quote go with it, you may be lacking the enthusiasm part of consent.
Yeah, and that's just gross.
It is gross. Now, again, you could just be perceiving it, right? Like maybe nobody's actually saying to you like, oh, just do it. But you might just be like, the power dynamic of the table might be like, I don't want to be the one who rocks the table.
Yep.
You're the new person. You're the only woman playing at the table. You're whatever. Like, you don't want to, like, these are all old dudes, and I'm, I'm the young guy at the table, and I don't want to look like I'm a, wuss or whatever. And so you don't enthusiastically consent to it. And again, as we talked about, when either one of these isn't fulfilled in either informed or enthusiastic, we're not really consenting.
Yeah.
So when you engage these mechanics as a GM or as a player, you are navigating dangerous waters where your actions in game can potentially upset or harm others.
Right.
Exactly. Which means that if we're going to use these in a game, we really need to have safety mechanics in place. Cannot stress that enough. Gotta have the safety mechanics in place if you're going to use these things. So, Jerry, what should we be doing to make it safe?
We should build safety around the mechanics themselves. As with all things regarding safety, we need to talk about establishing boundaries, we need to talk about getting consent, and we have to remember that we can reaffirm or revoke consent at any time. These abilities are going to require a good deal of trust among everyone in the game. And we're going to talk about the ideal situations first, and then address what happens if you don't do any of that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the ideal situation, which I think probably almost never occurs. Right? So your safety always starts at session 0. In all likelihood, you're having a safety discussion anyway in session 0 if you're doing session 0 the way I do it. I'm not going to say the right way, but I think you should be doing safety in your session 0. And if I know I'm playing a game with these powers in it, then I would bring them up in session 0. Like, hey guys, I just want to call your attention. Charm Person is a first level spell in this game. And I think we should probably have a talk about it because it is in all likelihood, either your wizard's going to take it or any number of NPCs in this game are likely going to have it since it's so accessible.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what that means for the game. And so, the first thing you do is you find out, is everybody okay having this mechanic in the game? So are we all good having Charm Person in it? Go ahead, take a moment, read up on it. Tell me what you think about it. What's your gut feel on it?
Yep.
And if people are like, no, this thing's stupid. I hate this stupid spell. I want to play the game, whatever. You just take the spell out of the game right there at session 0. You just be like, cool, good. We're just going to put that in our lines. No Charm Person.
Yep.
And if people were like, you know what, I'm okay with it, but I'm only okay with it up to this point. Like, I don't want it to be used so that I have to go to bed with, some bad guy or something.
Exactly.
Right? Be like, all right, cool, good. Let's build some framework around that. And then those become our lines, right? That we would follow inside the game.
All right. During the game, when it comes up, you should quickly remind everybody about those lines. This wouldn't be necessary if you're using it every game, but if you're 10 sessions in and suddenly you encounter your first mind player, this would be a good time to review that they don't either are or are not going to use things like Charm Person in the game. And this can be at the start of the session, or it can be done as a pause during the session. Just to let them know. Give people a chance to have that consent.
Right, again, just making sure you're informed and reaffirming, right? This is the reaffirming consent part. Yep. Also, during the session, you can check in as the power is being used. Right? So maybe the Mind Flayer has actually cast it successfully on a player. And then we can check in with everyone, especially the player who's being controlled, and just being like, look, I'm going to have your character, make the guard go stand in a closet, so that we can sneak by. Or are you cool with that? Right? That's our reaffirming consent. And if you have I can't stress this enough. At the very least, you should have a consent revoking tool on the table, such as an X card, that just allows at any time for somebody to revoke consent. Yeah. So that even if we've done our informed consent and we've been enthusiastic about it, that some situation comes up where somebody's like, not cool with it. I got to X this one out.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody would be like, gotcha, no problem. That he, instead of making you stand in the closet, are you okay if he just has you close your eyes for a second while he sneaks past?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Right.
All right.
Like maybe the person has a claustrophobia thing, right? And they don't want to have their character put in a dark closet or something.
Right.
We can X those things and work around them. And now that's the ideal situation, right? The ideal situation, we talked about it in session 0. We had a reminder of content, right? That's a content warning. We had a content warning as it came up. We had reaffirming consent, and we had ever present a consent revoking tool.
Right.
Ideal. I don't think this is how most of us, myself included, have dealt with this in the course of a game.
Right. So, this is the ideal setup. If your game has a lot of these mechanics that are going to be occurring, it's a good idea to start by setting that sort of thing up ahead of time. Have your discussions, let people be informed of what's coming up, and let them decide as a group what they do and don't want in the game. And if even one person says they don't want it, get rid of it. Okay? And second, if your game only has this as a rare case, such as you're about to play an exploration of Lair of the Mind Flayers, or your player suddenly gains a magic item that grants them domination, then you can have a new session 0 before discussion, just like you did at the beginning of the game. So then say, okay, this is what you've got, this is how it works, and these are the boundaries you've already set up. How do you guys feel about the rest of it? And then sit everyone down and say, this is the content we have. And if you've never talked about it before, we should say that. We haven't talked about this before, so let's set some boundaries that we're all comfortable with. And then have the reminders and the check-ins, and remind everybody that you have the consent revoking tool right there.
Consent revoking tool.
Consent revoking tool. And that it's available anytime. So even if you go past this session and later on somebody feels, you know what, this isn't, we want to have this happen, we can revoke consent and move on and deal with it and go from there.
Okay. So that's ideal.
Yep.
And even what Jerry talked about, it's a good way to deal with it as it comes up. But what if you didn't do any of those things, right? You're in the middle of the game and your player rolls for a random magic item and now suddenly has some like ring of suggestion, or the random monster you rolled for on the encounter table has mind control powers.
Yep.
What do we do?
All right. First, pause the game. Make sure everyone's okay with this content. And then if everybody's okay, keep going. And if someone's iffy about it, just X-card it out and move on. If someone even has I'm not really sure that we're going to do something else then.
That's not right, because that's not enthusiastic consent.
Correct.
Yep. Exactly. Enthusiastic consent is not consent, right?
Correct.
So that's perfect. And, in that case, it's like, cool, I'll just re-roll.
Yep.
Right? No big deal.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if everyone's okay, then we're going to have a quick boundary setting discussion.
That's right.
Right? If you're concerned about time, or, like maybe you're running this late in a con game, or you have have a short discussion now. And if the game's going to persist, you can have a longer one later, like after the game. Like you can have a quick talk now to set some boundaries, and then you can have a much deeper talk later, as long as everybody's comfortable. Right? But get some base level of comfort out of everyone in this like little bit of time where you pause.
Yep. All right. And next, be conservative in its usage. Without a good boundary setting discussion, don't rush to use the power full time at this time.
Yes.
Full power. This is easily the time when the most damage could be done. And so use it for something simple so that the players can see what's going to happen and see if they want to continue with consent.
Exactly. And check in with everyone when you do it, and remind everyone that there's an X card on the table.
Yeah.
Like, again, this could be a thing like we're playing and we got a half hour before we're done for the night, and like suddenly like the ring of suggestion comes up and it's like, all right, guys, we haven't talked about suggestion before, but like, are we comfortable? Like no self-harm, like no non-consensual sex, whatever. And everyone says yes. Then like where you can like, then the first thing you do with it is not like right up to that boundary, right? Yeah. The first thing you do with it is like Obi-Wan's Jedi mind trick.
Yeah.
You're like, these are not the droids you're looking for, right? And everybody's like, oh, cool. That's like cool use of suggestion. And we move on, right? And then later, you can go and have like a much bigger discussion and be like, hey, since this ring's going to be sticking around, like we really need to unpack this thing some more.
And don't forget, if you're the GM in the group, because players, regardless of how skilled they are, often look to the GM as kind of the person laying down the guidelines. If you look at it and say, this is just something I think is going to cause trouble, you can always discard it right off the bat as the GM. You know what? I just rolled against this. We're not going to do this. Move on.
I mean, you could secretly X card it. You could just roll it, look, and be like, nah.
But don't be afraid, though, as the GM, even if it's something that comes out of the table. The GM can lean on and go, I'm X carding this. You know what?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially if you see a player that looks like they're going to be in that questionable consent and they don't want to speak up. You know what? We're going to X card this. This is going to be on the table. Feel free to be friends with everybody and do that first. It's nothing wrong with X carding something that you think is going to cause trouble for everybody else, or even one person on the table.
I agree. Like, I mean, that's the thing that I don't think is often said enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
One always has the ability to advocate for themselves in terms of safety, but it is totally fine to advocate for someone else if you think that they are in some way unable or unwilling. Like, if you see the new person at the table and they're kind of looking back and forth, they look unsure about what's going on. You can not put them on the spot and just hit the X card yourself and be like, you know what, guys, fuck it. I'm done with mind flares. I don't want to actually fuck with these guys anymore. Like, just roll a new bad guy.
Yep.
And just, you let that person, like, you just help that person, right? You can do that.
You just help them have more fun at the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what we're here for. All right. So, as we close out this topic, we're going to just kind of review the main points. The first is, agency depriving mechanics are tricky, and they're fraught with lots of potential safety issues.
Absolutely. If you do the necessary safety work, establish boundaries, obtain informed and enthusiastic consent, reaffirm consent, and have a way to revoke consent, these mechanics can be used in a way that can create tension and challenges for your game. And as we showed you, you ideally want to just do this at the start of your game or session. But even if it comes up unexpectedly mid-game, there are definitely ways to be safe about it. I can't stress enough that almost every problem I have ever heard someone talk about these abilities are almost always because of a lack of safety. Now, the other ones like confusion or hold person, those are just fucking annoying.
Yeah.
Like, I just hate those. Like, I don't like those having a duration more than a turn. Because like getting knocked out for 12 turns is stupid in a game. But charm person, suggestion, puppetry, domination, whatever you call it, mind control, whatever you call it, like they are like, I don't know. My personal feeling is I avoid these like a plague in my own games. Like, there to me is not enough reward to warrant the risk side of this equation. It just has so much potential of just fucking things up. In fact, I would rather use hold person or confusion before I would use something like charm person. I can always cut the duration of a spell and just be like, oh, I knocked you out. You're confused for 2 turns. And then like I run around and do shit. Way less damaging than, by the way, Bob, you're my new best friend, and I'm going to need you to stop these arrows with your face.
Now, I have one question for you here.
Yeah.
How do you feel about an NPC villain using it on another NPC as a plot point?
No, I mean, I think it's still potentially triggering, right? Like, so if Baron Von Badass or Count Badass, let's call him the vampire, uses domination on an NPC and then like drinks them, that's all like rapey. Like, it's still uncomfortable at the table, and you can still harm someone who has triggers around those things. So,
and that's why I wanted to bring it up. I think it's good to point out that, because there are people that think that this agency has to be between player and GM or player to player. It can also be NPC to NPC if it makes people uncomfortable. It's just not something we want to bring up.
Now, I will say, to argue all points of this, that depending on your game, depending on whatever, you may have asymmetrical rules for this. Like, for instance, maybe you're totally like, look, no more than like, I'll hold the door shut for Baron Von Badass for my humanoid people characters. But mind control on the droid army I'm totally okay if they shoot each other.
Mhm.
Right? Because they're droids and they're just like, the mindless drones can shoot each other. Or if I take the gauntlet of, drone control, I can blow up all the drones. Like, have them all blow each other up. Like, it can be that you have asymmetrical rules for this.
Yeah.
But
again,
I think that
having that conversation before you get started,
Yes.
make sure
that's
everybody at the
exactly it.
table is on board, then you're good.
Right. And so I think where you really where we get into it is if the ability is interrupting a sentient creature's autonomy / authority is where it gets dangerous and dicey. When it's something like hacking and I'm hacking robots, if your robots are robots without souls, right? So I can hack I can hack Clone War droid, not Clone War. Yeah, I can hack Clone War droids, but not Data.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you do this to Data, it's icky. Right? In the episode where Lore takes control of Data using the emotion chip, it's icky. Right? Like, it's uncomfortable. No one likes it. It's definitely against Data's consent. Right? Very different than getting like a couple of droidicas to turn and shoot each other. Which is like, I have no feelings about.
Yeah. That's the terror
until
of the
you get
board.
to Solo, and then I have some more feelings about it, because by Solo, then, I mean, look, context is important for these things, right? If we're playing Clone Wars, I'm probably going to just let you blow up. I'm going to probably just let you control and blow up some droids by shooting each other. If we're playing Solo, and one of the characters is, decided to be, part of the Droid Liberation Front, then no, we're not, then we're definitely not doing that. Again, this is why I hate these abilities. I fucking hate them. Right? Charles Xavier should be an NPC in all Marvel superhero games. Should never be allowed to play Charles Xavier. It's just it's so tricky that you really do have to have the full safety discussion. And I know that people are like, but you gotta pause the game. Not our people, because our people get all this stuff, but people will be like, but you pause the game and have this feelings discussion. Yeah, you do. And you know what? It sometimes isn't even that long of a discussion, especially if you just underplay the power as a GM. If you've got the mind flares and you haven't had this discussion with people, underplay what they can do. Go make someone drop their sword and stand in the corner.
Yeah. Yep.
No one's going to like it, but everybody will probably be okay with it. And again, if you do the other things, have an X card on the table. I can't stress enough. Having an X card on the table and a check-in will save you from so many pitfalls.
Yep.
The check-in alone. Are we all good with this? Bob, are you cool if are you cool if I just have your character drop the sword and stand back from this, and then the spell's over, next turn you pick up your sword and stuff, right? Probably Bob's going to say yes. I'm not going to assume he's going to say yes, because I'm going to check in with him. But I got a good feeling that I underplayed the power enough, as opposed to, Bob, I'm going to make you run down that hallway full of unknown traps.
Yeah.
We're all pretty sure there's traps down that hallway. I'm just going to make you run down it. You cool with that?
Nope.
Probably less cool, right? Especially if we haven't had this talk.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough. I don't like this. I don't, like I said, when I saw that piece on Facebook, I looked at it and I was like, it's a bad mechanic, it's a bad GM, and it's a shitty player.
Yeah.
It is a cascade failure of problems.
Yeah.
And the player who's got the device is just being shitty.
Yeah.
You are using it to control your other players. Honestly, I just wait till you were sleeping and kill you. I would just write a note to the GM and be like, when this motherfucker's sleeping and I'm not under some suggestion, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Just
that's the kind of shitty player that would be like, oh, we need to check for traps. Okay, I'm going to use suggestion on Bob, have him run down the hallway and check for traps, and think it's funny as shit.
I got 5 henchmen
Yeah.
Like
no.
henchman 1, walk down the hallway.
No.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the wrong way to
Player
do that.
mutiny is actually the correct way to deal with that.
Mhm.
He can't get all of you. Like if you get him in a rush, he can't get all of you with suggestion.
Yeah. Your friends
One
might
of you
take
will
me in a
get
rush,
through.
but not before I make your head into a canoe. Sorry.
Yeah.
I went all Tombstone
right.
there.
That's all right. I respect any and all Tombstone quotes
I
in
do
our
too.
show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take us home, JR.
All right. So, that was our coverage of HD depriving mechanisms. We hope the next time you use one in your game, you'll do it safely.
And now one more check-in with the chat room before we head off to the conversation corner. And our chat room is all over this with us. They're
Yes,
pretty
they
much in
are.
agreement. That's
Mhm.
there's so many problems. Senda did make a good point that in conjunction with there's almost no perfect, like you can try to do it perfectly, but the perfect scenario almost doesn't exist. Rather than saying we can make it safe, we should probably say we can make it safer.
Yeah, that's
Because there's no making it 100%, but we can get close. So safer is probably the better way to put it.
That is a very fair assessment.
Yeah. There's just Andy's made a suggestion for another show, possibly, is how to play a non-rapey vampire.
Oh,
Because
what?
man,
Listen,
vampires are so.
I got a lot of feels about non-rapey vampires. Like, I'm not in support of them in the least, but I also find it to be a very difficult. I find it to be very difficult without it getting. I find it to be very difficult because you can just take away the domination power. That'll get rid of the first layer of rapey vampires, but people still get attacked in that game and attacked in vampire games and drank, and have their blood drank, which is also non-consensual, which is a thing I actually did to you to make you a vampire, Bob.
Yeah.
I non-consensually drank you. You were the only one in that group, and again, back in the 90s when we just played with razor blades on the table and no fucking safety.
Yeah. Now, honestly, the way I remember it, that was a discussion we had about, like, how did each of you become a vampire? Like,
oh, good. Thank God.
You didn't just go, you're a vampire now because I like that. That was part of the discussion of when we were creating those characters. So you and I actually did have that discussion.
Ooh, okay, good.
It's still squicky because my character was embraced without consent, but the player and the GM both said, "Hey, this is how the character got to become a vampire," and we were both okay with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, we did unknowingly we had a safety discussion without having safety tools at the time.
Everyone else.
You didn't just throw that on me. Yeah. But yeah,
you can see where a game can take a really bad turn.
Yeah. Now there was a moment in that game where another player had their character do a thing to my character, and it was like, "Whoa, dude! What?"
Man,
and we had a moment there that caused a little bit of a blow up.
If there was ever a game we played in the past that begged for an X card,
oh man,
it was that game. Like, there were so many cases where it was like, 1, we should stop pushing the boundaries of this.
Yeah.
2, this is really getting creepy. Yeah.
I like to think that everybody at that table would have.
It seems to be the game in general, though.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of it.
Yeah.
The game is like a ball of razor blades.
I like to think that the people that were playing in that particular game would have been amenable to safety tools if we had.
I totally think we would have.
I think that table would have been like, okay, cool, let's do this.
Yeah. In fact, I think we would have enthusiastically embraced it because I think when we understood what it was really there for, to play harder, we would have done that.
Yeah. Because that was a table that was pushing the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this about non-rapey vampires. If your vampire is an apex predator, it's almost impossible for it to be it's impossible for it to be a non-consensual vampire. There are things you can do to make your vampire a consensual feeding vampire, right? So blood banking, blood dolls.
Yeah.
So now we get into kind of a fetish thing where
Yeah.
you know there's a group of people somewhere that like to be have their blood drank. I had a vampire in the campaign who had a couple blood dolls. But oh no, she had a couple blood dolls. I had another one who specifically liked to hunt, and took artistic pleasure in her prey. It's a tough game.
Yeah.
I think it's a game you got to layer with a lot of safety.
Yeah.
And not a game that I ever played with safety because I played it in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Any other closing topics on that? Like any other?
Yeah, I think we're good for now. I think we can.
Cool.
I just want to bring up, I think, Jared's last comment that Star Wars role-playing game, this happens in a lot of games, do varying degrees of a good job of saying that droids should not be the property of anyone else in the party unless everybody agrees it's a good idea.
Yeah,
one character owning another species is a problem. And this is where I gotta say, your concept about it's okay to shoot the battle droids, they all have personalities. They're not mindless drones in the Clone Wars. And that's a big thing that is an issue that has to come up.
And again, I'm okay, right? So that would for me, that would move the goalpost on it, right? When we see them in the prequels, they don't appear to have any kind of like real, like I did not differentiate, and maybe I just didn't watch prequels enough. Like in the prequels, I would not have flinched if one shot the other. In fact, I think there were a couple cases where they did.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but if you're telling me that later in the Clone Wars they actually did have personalities, then yes, I would definitely have problems with that.
Yeah, there were some instances in the animated series where they kind of did have distinct personalities.
Yeah, and to me that's the line, right? Like when you're talking about control of something, somebody, something, someone that has free will and sentience, and you take that away, that's squicky.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If I'm just controlling some sort of drone that's part of, if I hack the water authority's drone and use it to shoot the other water authority wasp drone, that's equipment shooting equipment.
Yeah. Jared just added to the point that the way the topic played out was that in the Clone Wars, both the Separatists and the Republic were using sapient beings to fight their wars, but acting as if they didn't count because the one side had the droids and the other side had the clones, and it's like,
trying to write each other off.
Yeah, and it's like,
which is its own form of evil, right?
Yeah. So, interesting point.
Nice. I'm it's kind of nice to see that Clone Wars got nuanced on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, if you haven't seen the Clone Wars show, watch it. Good show. Good show. A lot of fun.
You're not going to end up loving the Jedi as much as you have saw the movies. Put it that
the Jedi
way.
are problematic. They're not like it's not clear cut, black and white. These are good guys. These are bad guys. There's gray areas. There's gray areas.
One of the things they touched on in the Clone Wars that was part of one of the books was the clones realizing that, hey, you know what? Like, they don't have medical centers for any of us. Like, nobody ever goes away as an injured clone and comes back.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a retirement plan for us. And more importantly, none of us get to say, I don't want to actually fight.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's not an option, right? Like,
no.
You've been cloned. No. Yeah. You have been cloned in order to serve.
Yep.
You're a slave army, and that's all there is to it. So,
yeah.
And the Jedi seem to be fine with that for the most part.
Yeah.
Except for a few.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah. All right, kids. What do you say we hit the conversation corner?
Let's
do it.
Bingo, bango, bongo. All right. Why don't you start, Jerry? And I'm going to do the old man run to the facility.
Okay. I know that Bob's going to go heavily into this. So I'm just going to say Bill's game was fun. As somebody who grew up in Buffalo and has watched them win and then lose and lose and lose and lose. It was fun to watch them play and play well. Part of what I like about the team this year is that they're constantly doing very creative plays and plays you don't expect. And you get to see really interesting things like false punts and so on. And this week we had just the longest, longest interception return in the playoff season, and this was a lot of fun. Plus, my wife watches the football a little bit, but she gets really excited about things, and when she's screaming at the TV, "Run, you motherfucking cunt!" at the top of her lungs.
Oh my God!
I know we're having a wonderful game. I feel the same way, but you know what? It just makes me have a good time. I finished watching Cobra Kai. Last week we talked about it, and we talked about my feels about the fact that there were all these bullies pretty much walking around unscathed. And you guys said wait till the end. I am not satisfied in the least.
Well, I mean,
this show, I know that we're going to have another season.
Yes.
And I don't want to root it for anybody else. I'm just going to say the amount of ridiculous bullying and violence that goes on with absolutely zero repercussions, and the amount of gaslighting that goes on with zero repercussions, bother me. I still love this show. It's a lot of fun, but good God, I walked away from it feeling like almost traumatized. Like this was high school.
I will say that I was happy that there was, without going into any details, there is a heel turn moment in the end that occurs.
I was not happy with that at all. I wanted to see him get his teeth knocked out.
No, not me, because I've always liked that character, but that's a character that kind of lost his way, and kind of happy to see him kind of coming back. Like that's a redemption arc. And
it's got a long way to go to redeem in my eyes, man.
Well, and I think that's what season 4 is going to be about, right? I think season 4 is going to be a lot about, it's going to be. I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah. There are some amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's hard to give any. I don't want to talk. I'm going to stop because
I'll just say there were some really good callbacks. There was some really good acting, some great personality things, a few things I wanted to see happen. But good God, I feel traumatized by that show.
I mean, it's got a lot of got a lot of bullying, right?
Yeah.
It's got a lot of bullying, and yes, like the trope of the show is that there are basically these marauding karate fights that like law enforcement and adults like don't seem to get involved in.
Yeah,
like just not just the repercussions of, like I said, the gaslighting that goes on that never gets like there's no punishment for the bad guys. The good guys get punished constantly. The bad guys don't have any punishment.
Well, and again, I think it's a setup, right? I think that's.
Oh, I certainly hope so.
I think that's a build up for what 4 winds up becoming.
Yeah. But also Star Trek this week, I really enjoy Esme's character. I liked her the last time I saw it, and to be able to see all the episodes with her has been a lot of fun. I think she's a really nice replacement for Julian as a POV character. She's obviously the person learning about the station again for the first time, which gives a good, nice little ring to it. I also liked, and we talked about this, Star Trek tropes, and there seems to be the Star Trek trope of the reoccurring friend, family member that comes on, and every time there's an episode with them, it's just going to be trouble. In DS9, it was Troy's mom. In TNG, it was Troy's mom. In DS9, anytime the Grand Nagus is involved, it's going to be zany misadventures no matter what. Yes. So I like that a lot. We continued our Kids on Bikes game this weekend, which has been a lot of fun. We're right up to the end. The last couple games we've played, Glenn has ended it on a cliffhanger. And so we're stumbling around getting into trouble. And lastly, I've been playing video games and figured out that I discovered a major glitch that I was able to undo by just going back a couple days with a game and fixing one little spot. So I'm just having a good time as kind of a way to kind of escape for a little while, doing fun things. So that was my week. Like I said, it's been kind of a blur, and we'll go on to we'll go to Phil now. Phil, what was your week like?
Yeah, so I had a 3-day weekend. That was nice. I definitely enjoyed having some additional time off, and my daughter's birthday was this weekend, so I'm now officially the parent of 2 teenagers. So, that with all the thrill that comes with having 2 teenagers. Watched Bill's game, of course. That was our Saturday night. Talked about WandaVision earlier. I watched some episodes of 7 Days. It's not a good show. I like it. It's not a good show. But I am sure as shit I could turn it into a role-playing game.
Oh,
yeah.
Like, I'm watching it, I'm like, oh my god, I could turn this into a role-playing game in like 5 minutes. Like this, I got several ideas of how to make this work. So it was fun to watch a couple episodes. That I finished Voyager on Monday. I got really close to the end. I was like, this is it. I'm just gonna hunker down and watch the last couple episodes. And with it, I had been keeping a list all along the way. So I have just a little work to do to make it into the Watch Club list. What I like to do is I like to go online, and I did this for TNG. I did this for DS9 as well. I go online now and I look for people's top 10 Voyager episodes and make sure that I have them all in my list as well.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I do. This list is longer than TNG, but shorter than DS9.
I would have expected it was probably somewhere in that area.
I could shorten it because there are a lot of episodes that I marked as just like, these are good episodes. Like, they're enjoyable to watch episodes. And I do a little of that as I trim the, like when I get the list packaged into week bundles, like for each week. Sometimes I drop one, sometimes I add one, but I'm pretty close. Like it needs a couple hours of work, and we'll have a watch list for Voyager.
You did that this week.
What's that?
You did that this week. You added in bada bing, bada bang, didn't you? It wasn't originally on the list.
It wasn't originally on the list, but everybody really likes Vic. So I was like, and on top of it, the rest of the stories get really dark. Like, not really dark, but like, there's no more fun. There's no more haha.
They're intense.
Episodes
It's
left
a
in the
very
series,
serious
right?
ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
So
a
I
lot
was
of
like, you know what?
serious
Let's
things
watch Bada Bing, Bada Boom tonight, because that's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it'll be a nice little light note before we start the conclusions. And last week I think I told you guys I bought an Apple Pencil out of anxiety. This week I found a nice drawing program that is, when I say drawing program, I mean the kind of drawing program I need, which is, hey, so you suck at drawing, let me see if we can help you. So I've been like spending some time practicing on it, and I'm getting okay. Like, I can make some reasonably decent maps that I could use for games. Like, I could export them and put them into Roll20 as either, like, full on maps that we could put out and put tokens on, or something I could drop on the screen to be like, oh, this is what it looks like. And I'm very cool with that, right? Like, that's what I kind of wanted to be able to do. I mean, truthfully, look, I bought the Apple Pencil because I was sad and anxious from the insurrection. And now I'm just kind of like trying to find a home for it in my gaming ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'm going to try with it is I'm going to try to actually take my session notes instead of on index cards. I'm going to take them on the iPad and see if I can't just directly import them into OneNote. OneNote has some handwriting. OneNote doesn't have handwriting. It has drawing abilities. And I don't want, like, what I think I want is the kind that goes from handwritten to converting it to text, like, so that it's more legible. I have one more app I need to take a look. I think it was somebody who told me to take a look at Good Notes, which I think is done by the same company that makes my favorite PDF reader, which is Good Reader. I will say this for the Apple Pencil. It's pretty fucking nice. I've had a number of styluses, Bluetooth and non-Bluetooth for the iPad in the past. Never really liked any of them. This one is really nice. Like, it feels comfortable. It's easy to write with. I'm left-handed, and my palm does not create any artifacts when I'm writing with it. Super nice. So anyway, I've been having fun doing that. That's me, Bob.
Yeah, so as we pointed out before, I've been going through a lot of feels with football. There was a moment when the Bills won their first playoff game in the wild card round against Indianapolis. They showed, because they let 6,700 fans into the stadium for the game. And they showed a couple of fans, and one of them was crying after the game was over. And it's like there's a lot of emotion tied up in the diehard fans who have watched this team struggle for so long after the glory days of 4 Super Bowls, but also 4 Super Bowls that they lost. And there was a couple of moments during the last 2 weekends where I could feel myself getting choked up with all the emotion of these victories and going, man, I cannot imagine what this town is going to be like if they do the what some people would call the impossible. Like, oh no, like you see all the time, a basketball team wins the NBA championship and there's rioting in the streets, and it's the excited, happy rioting, but like shit is on fire. And I'm like, why are you burning stuff because your team won?
We're not Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's like, what is going on here?
The thing is, I don't see that as something that we're going to see as much of here as far as...
I can't see us taking to the streets and lighting things on fire and flipping cars over, but I can see us taking to the streets and yelling and screaming in pleasure and like people hugging each other and crying, like especially the older fans that have been through the dark times. And it's like, I think that's what you're going to see.
I think you won't hear a quiet street for like 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be fireworks and...
I think for 12 hours, you're just going to hear horns going. I remember...
My staff is pushing me hard that if we win the Super Bowl, to just close the office on Monday, and I'm doing it spot.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see a lot of places in Buffalo being like, fuck it, close up. We're good.
We're done. Send us saying, don't hug each other, pandemic. And I'm like...
Well, yes.
Like bubble hugging. Like, the people that are in your pandemic bubble hugging.
Yes.
Like you're... Like, don't be running up to the neighbor up the street and be like hugging him and crying tears on each other. No, that's bad.
I'm pretty sure people will be out of their houses.
They're going to, because
there will be people walking out of their houses, waving to each other, yelling from their front doors.
And there will be people that are like, screw the bubbles, because there were people that didn't have masks on and went to the airport and were not socially distant from each other. But,
what I remember,
it's going to be
what I remember from, years ago, you took me to go see the Bandits for the championship game back in like 97 or something, 96, 97, something like that. And I remember walking out of the Odd, and like you could not hear anything over the honking cars in the street. Like every car was honking, everybody was cheering. Like, it'll.
So
here's the thing, right? Like. Other sports teams have, great love for their teams, or whatever. I don't know, because I don't live in other cities. What I know is that there have been years where this team has been god awful, and there are still people out in those stands.
Yep.
Week after week.
Yep.
Right. Like, I mean, there are some diehard fans in this city.
Yep.
And it is nice to have a team that wins games. That plays well and makes football exciting, man.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, this past week's game, the first half of the game, I'm like, oh, where is this going? And then it took off.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we're in it now. Like, it's time.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting.
So I'll move on from the sports ball so the people don't get overwhelmed with too much sports.
It's really Buffalo Pride ball. Like we're like less talking about sports ball, more just talking about city pride.
We finished up our Quest game on Thursday, and then the rest of the games for the weekend were canceled for various reasons. So there was no gaming for me after Thursday night. But we had a nice, satisfying conclusion to our mystery in Quest. That was a good time. Thanks again to Jared for running that. WandaVision, as we've already said, is amazing. I picture in my head now, every time I think about WandaVision, I picture in my head a bunch of people sitting around a table with Kevin Feige going, we've got this idea for what we want to do for this TV show. And I imagine in my head when Peter Quill finds out that he's got the ability to draw on the light from inside Ego, the living planet. And he's like, they pitch the stuff and Feige's like, all right, I like this idea. And then the writers are all going, we're going to make a lot of weird shit. With the excitement level that Peter Quill had, and then Feige's like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
Damn straight we are.
Good times. I'm very, very excited to see where we go.
I'm excited about it
with this show, and can't wait for Friday for episode 3. And then of course, just with the way things unfolded over the weekend and into the beginning of the week is dealing with the loss of a family pet, which is never an easy thing, and it's just you got to deal with it and you got to move on. It's something that's gonna happen because pets don't have the lifespan that humans do. Darwin made it to 14 years. It's a good long time. I will say this, if you're thinking about getting a pet, especially a dog, if you want to get a dog, I like pure breeds with papers.
Yeah.
There's a pretentiousness to that in my mind. All
Mm-hmm.
right. And I'm not saying that if you do that, you're pretentious, but it has that kind of a feel to it. Like, I'm going to get a paper dog who's a pure breed, who's not mixed with anything. It's like, if you do that, be advised that you are setting yourself up for medical issues because the pure breeds, they've been inbred so much that they've created their own problems. There is almost no pure breed of dog that does not have a short lifespan and a lot of medical issues. You get yourself a nice lovable mutt that's 2 or 3 different breeds mixed together. That dog's going to last a lot longer and is going to have a lot fewer medical issues to deal with. And that's, you're giving yourself, you're extending the possibility of that family friend being around a lot longer. To answer Senda's question in the chat room, Darwin was a mix. He was a shepherd something. We don't know what he was mixed with, but he was definitely mixed with something. He definitely looked more shepherd than anything else. But he was a mix, so that's one of the reasons why I think he made it to 14. But he a lot of dogs have problems with the hip area. It's a common problem, especially with the pure breeds. Darwin ended up with something that was neurological. It wasn't the classic hip problem. But that being said, if you got them, love them, hug them. And like I said, if you're going to go get one, go to the
SPCA.
The SPCA, go to the pounds, the places where if this dog doesn't get picked up in the next, couple of days or a week or whatever, that they're going to end up, euthanizing them because they don't have room. Go and get those, because there are tons of animals in those shelters that will give you a ton of love back, and will be great members of your family for a long time, if you give them a chance. So there's my preachy moment for the day.
I agree with you 100% on that, Bob.
Yeah. So that is the conversation corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can do the Patreon shout-outs and get into the after show. Give people a little extra Patreon shout-outs. We are back to the top of the order, as it were, to use a sports metaphor. The Royal family of patrons. So here we go. This is one of my favorite lists because we get to do all the extra bits. Andrew Dacey, the Warden of Whiskies. Andy Olson,
frequent
member of the attendee of the Friday Lunch Club. Yeah. Andy Olson, the Duke of Dice. Brian Kurtz, the Royal Doctor of Physic. Craig, the Lord of One Name. Eric Bonts, who is the Duke of Gators and also the Lord of Beefness. GM Gerrymander, the Lord of the After Show. Jesse Edmond, the Royal Doctor. Jim, the Royal Merchant Emeritus. John,
also making a lot of appearances.
Also making appearances now, yes. John C. LeMay, the Guard at the End of the World. Evil John Carney, the Court Necromancer.
Also on the Lunch Club.
Yep. Kevin Lovecraft, the Royal Beard, who is seems to be doing really, really well, recovering from the COVID.
Yes. Would also like to see Kevin Lovecraft on the luncheon.
That would be nice. I don't know if he has the capability with his current situation, but if he can make it, that would be awesome. Richard Wyatt, captain of the Royal Airship Fleet. Schmitty. Everybody's favorite keeper of the labyrinth. Also,
I talk to Schmitty all the time, though.
Club.
Yeah.
I see Schmitty at the Lunch Club. I talk to Schmitty at night on Mumble.
Yep. Yeah, we get to have a lot of Schmitty contact. Tiberius Starcrash Smith, the Baron of Britannia. And Todd Crapper, the Prophet of Probability. Thank you all for being members of the Royal Court and for being patrons of the show. And thanks to everyone for listening.
If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's Time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with our other awesome listeners in the chat room for life and ask us the occasional question while we prattle on about something gaming related.
If you cannot make a live show, check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcast, and take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Mastering Dungeons, Bonestone Obsidian, the FM Gamers, Candace Talking Games, the Gnomecast, Jangu Hustle, The Lounge, Bonus Experience, and back episodes of She's a Super Geek. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
After you have made your resistance roll and shook off the shackles of mind control, punch that GM right in the face. No. You know what? You could just leave us some feedback. Do that instead. Leave us some feedback. You can reach out directly via email at mmp@misdirectedmark.com. Hit us up on Twitter. The show and the network is at misdirectedmark. This is Robert M. Everson. This is GM Gerrymander, and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Mastering Dungeons, and Pandas Talking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. Jangu Hustle is at patreon.com/Jangu Hustle, and Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Mastering Dungeons, and Pandas Talking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Bamboo Lounge, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
We out.